Hello, all you LAWsome listeners. We just came off of an interview with Peter Webb, and I'll say it's one of my favorites. I really feel like there are lots of practical advice in this discussion in terms of running a practice, or if you have any involvement in marketing. The whole concept was around efficiency, finding efficiency in a law practice, and it's one of the honestly areas that most firms are neglecting. They're trying to solve it with other things like marketing, and frankly, this is one that's going to help make you money this year. If you listen and you take advice and you actually drive with action, I promise you this is worth its weight. Matt, what are our listeners going to hear in this episode?
Yeah, I mean, two big takeaways for me. One is getting more cases does not necessarily translate into more profit, and that's back to that whole topic of efficiency. And Peter really left us with some really practical takeaways on how law firms can be more efficient, regardless of the size of your law firm. And then the second, towards the end of the conversation, we started diving into marketing specifically and talking about different tactics and another just gem from Peter, which is activity does not equal productivity. And he gave us, again, some very practical takeaways on what to focus on, what's important, and then also what's not important and things that you don't necessarily need to focus on. So, yeah, terrific conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Agreed. This one's good. We hope you enjoy. Hello, welcome to another LAWsome episode. I'm your host, Tanner Jones, along with my co-host, Matt Smyers. We're going to dive back into Season 5 of LAWsome with our good friend, Peter Webb. Peter has over 25 years of experience in the legal digital marketing. Really want to dive into that because I suspect that's right at the beginning of Internet's time when Peter jumped in, focused on law firm marketing. He's a sought-after speaker, among many other things, but he's presented at legal conferences like the American Association for Justice, National Trial Lawyers, MASH Torts Made Perfect, various other legal industry podcasts, webinars, and much more. Today's topic is from chaos to control, efficiencies your law firm should be utilizing. Excited to finally have you on the show, Peter.
This is wonderful. I've been waiting a long time. Thank you so much, Tanner and Matt.
Most certainly. Let's just dive in with your background first, Peter, so our listeners can understand kind of where you came from, how you've dug your way through the trenches over the years. How did you start in the legal profession, and what's led you to where you are today?
Okay, going back a quarter of a century. So right around 2000, I helped co-found a pretty large digital marketing agency intended to help attorneys spend more time in court and with their clients. And we intended to help them do the stuff that they didn't want to do very much of, like networking and marketing and advertising and websites. And so that grew over time, and then technology really evolved. And as time went, I saw more and more law firms had a pretty key question, which is, what do I do to get more cases? And that's true 25 years ago, and it's true today, and it'll be true in 25 years as well. And really, the landscape has changed so dramatically. How people consume media, how people go to look for answers. I mean, if you think about it, back in 2000, few people went on the internet to go seek out, who should I hire for my law firm, for my case? Do I even have a case? How do I figure it out? And today people are using ChatGPT. People are like, a very different experience. So over time, I saw kind of marketing was one key point, right? And making sure that you are really treating your clients and delivering the best experience possible, but also internally making sure you're running the best law firm that you possibly can, which includes like client communication, and are you tracking the right things? Do you have the right partners and the right vendors and the right agencies? And so as time went, I kind of hit a ceiling because I was in the sales business development side of things. And I kept hitting the ceiling, which was, not all firms just need marketing. Some of them actually need to do some things internally, but I didn't know what those were. I'm not an attorney. And so I ended up becoming a chief of staff at a plaintiff firm in Houston, and that was like diving into the very deep waters that I was not expecting, because now I'm dealing with personnel, HR, dockets, who's doing what, egos, personalities. There's quite a bit of things, and so along the way, I saw, wow, there's a lot more to it, and it's really both internal efforts as well as external efforts working together to create an efficient practice. And so that's really what started as, almost selling websites to, 25 years ago, to now really advising and understanding every key step along the way of how does a law practice work and run, and what's successful, what's not successful for that practice. And so long journey, and not over, but it's definitely it's definitely changed.
Yeah, and Peter, I love hearing you talk about efficiencies, and I know Tanner teased that in the intro as kind of our overarching subject for today. And I love this quote from you. You said, "Without fixing inefficiencies, more clients won't make your firm profitable." I love that. Tell us a little bit more about that concept.
It honestly, it's so many firms are treating marketing as a magic bullet to solve all problems. And it's not fair. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to the agency. No one actually wins with that, because it's not the whole story. It's only what they're experiencing. It's not the root of the problem. If you have a great marketing engine driving calls and inquiries, and your intake is not answering those calls or treating it with the priority, or unfortunately, if there's an ego involved, which is, oh, they called me, I'll be fine calling them back in a couple days when I get to it. That's just not the world we live in anymore, and that's like now a lost case. And so if you think about it, trying to actually make the firm profitable. So that doesn't mean like, let's throw more marketing dollars, advertising dollars, and you grow, but you are exactly, but you're not growing profitably, right?
Yeah.
And so really what I'm looking at is, why do you need more cases? And how well do you know and track how you're getting cases currently, what it's costing you to get those cases? Are there any improvements that you can make to perhaps keep in touch with prior clients, networking with other law firms that might practice in a different area and might be able to actually create a quid pro quo where you can receive certain ones, whether it's with a referral fee or not? But really doing a lot more of the internal work instead of skipping corners and just kind of throwing it at the doorstep of a marketing agency of, hey, get me more calls. That's why that's such an important thing to just remember of, hey, this is a machine, and pouring gas into a broken machine is not going to run any better. You need to have a well-oiled machine with the fuel to succeed. So it really is more of a partnership with an agency than anything else.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned intake certainly being an inefficiency we see at Consult Webs on occasion, no doubt. What are some of the most common? You gave us a few examples, but just for our listeners to start to diagnose, where should they start?
So a lot of inefficiencies occur through their process of marketing lives in its own silo, right? And they'll get a report and they treat that completely separate. Intake, they feel is almost untouchable. Like, we answer the phone, everything's fine, but they don't pay attention to how well is the experience, how quickly are they getting back to them, how diligently are they following up with them, and going along those lines. The entire case journey for a client, how quickly is that occurring? For instance, motor vehicle accident cases throughout various states, usually you want to get them done in 3, 4 months, 90 to 120 days. Some firms, I'll go in and I'll see they're completing them in 180 days, sometimes 240 days. And so there's all these inefficiencies where they're leaving money on the table. They're not paying attention to what's working and what's not working. And so really, honestly, the definition of efficient actually comes to mind, which is maximizing productivity while minimizing wasted effort and money, like wasted resources. So how well are you running your practice? So that way you have a pretty good insight to how everything leads together into the next thing. So everything segues like a journey. And currently, I see a lot of firms that have a case management software and they're using about 10% of it. They're not using any reports and they're not actually diving into it. Client communication, they're getting bad reviews. So they say, I'm getting bad reviews. Well, what are you doing to create a good review? What are you doing to have better client communication? Keep in touch with them. Let them know what stage their case is at. It's especially true with med mal because there might be a gap of 12 to 18 months from when you sign them to when you're actually, ramping everything up. And so what are you doing to actually keep in touch with them? And a lot of firms, I'll talk to them and they'll say, well, what do I have to report? Nothing's happening with their case. And I say, you know that. They don't know that. Like, they have a birthday somewhere in that year, like wishing them happy birthday or just showing them that,
Yeah, some form of communication.
I would take a lot of small firms fall into the trap of feeling like they don't need to worry about efficiency until they get to a certain size. I would caution against that, right? And I'm curious your thoughts, Peter. There are ways to build in efficiency regardless of scale. And if you wait until the point when you figure, I just want to fill the top of the funnel first and get all the cases, and I'll worry about being efficient later, that you're setting yourself up for a roadblock there.
Completely, completely. Efficiency starts the second you decide to open up a practice, even if you are by yourself. In fact, it's even more true when you're a smaller firm because there's only so many resources you have. You can't delegate because you're doing most of it. And even if you have a partnership, what you typically find is you're not learning marketing in law school. You're not learning business in law school. You're not learning finance in law school. So those create some pretty key issues. You might be great in a courtroom or in front of a panel of jurors. Fantastic. Who's running your practice as a business through that process? And how are you making sure you're building a great reputation? I mean, nowadays, having a great brand is largely what you do to earn that brand and goodwill and create a good experience and show people you care. So if you don't have processes in place, then it's almost haphazard. You might treat one person great and you might be, facing a deadline or something that you have to get out by noon. And then you get a call of a potential inquiry and you kind of say, hey, you don't have a case, call back later, or, call back when you have a case, and they get a bad feeling from that. And then they go online and they want to tell the world about it,
And you mentioned about building that brand, and that's a perfect segue into another topic that we wanted to dive into with you. And often on this podcast, we talk about visionary leadership, and a lot of firms feel they often have a very solid plan starting out, only to realize down the road they're struggling not only to execute it, but to stay true to that vision. What words of wisdom do you have for those that are seeking to build a strong, consistent, lasting brand?
So there's a great book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There, Marshall Goldsmith. It's a fantastic book because it really brings you to the congratulations on getting to whatever level you're at now. Doing the same thing at a smaller scale may not be what gets you to the next level. So really, visionary leadership starts with visionary thinking, which is, where are you going? Do you have a clear-cut understanding of what that vision looks like and who you need to get there? And have you mapped it out? Do you have a roadmap? Have you even thought of empathy and emotional intelligence, right? Which is tied to the team members and what they need and want. I cannot tell you how many firms I've gone into where I start going down the rabbit hole and it's clear that unfortunately at the top of the leadership of the firm they're treating people like a machine. Like, oh yeah, that person's done intake for the past 10 years. They're fine, and they haven't once stopped and said, hey, how are you doing? How's it going? And what ends up happening? The person ends up randomly quitting one day. And they want to get a change of pace. And they go, what happened? I'll pay you more money. And it's all reactive. And the problem was They didn't ask, what are your goals? You've been here for 10 years. We really value that. What did you want to do? Oh, you wanted to be a case manager. Okay, let's talk about how to get you in line with that. Now, what job is typically, you know, I guess, responsible for that? HR. How big of a law firm do you need to have an HR person? Quite big. So there's this huge gap of like, you might have 3 attorneys, 15, 20 staff. You're not going to have an HR person, and you might not even have a chief of staff. And so here you are with, who does that fall on? So visionary leadership is also caring for your people. It's making sure, do I have the vision? Do we have the resources? Acknowledgement and rewards, and really calling out when people do a great job. You know, I could talk about this forever, but
I feel like, and you mentioned the roadmap, right? And I feel like one of the biggest mistakes that law firms and other businesses too make is if they take that time to set that vision on the front end, which a lot of businesses don't, right? They confuse goals, financial goals in particular, with vision for their business, but that's another topic in and of itself. But I feel like the mistake that they often make is if they do set that vision, then they're not consistently going back to it and revisiting that vision and that roadmap every time they're faced with a major decision for the business. And the way I like to explain it is, you need to go back to that vision, that mission statement, and anytime you're making a major decision, you have to ask yourself, is this consistent with or against what we already agreed upon is our vision and our mission? If the answer to that question is no, then you need to reconsider that vision or that mission, or you've just answered your question as to whether we should go down this path. And I feel like too many times that path that starts, kind of straight and narrow starts to get all these branches, and then it just becomes diluted.
Completely agreed. It also segues from the mission statement, right? What are you trying to accomplish, to what are the core principles? Because it's tied to integrity, right? Which is, what are you doing to really earn the goodwill, and what's important to you? Because I hear all the time, I can't find good people. And I kind of ask, I say, well, what are you doing to attract good people? Because that's really the question. What are you doing to attract good people? If you're cutting corners, shady in certain areas, doing this, doing that, I wouldn't feel secure working at a place like that. So a lot of the things, again, it comes back to what we talked about right at the beginning, right? Which is, they see a problem and they want to address the problem. But if you bring it back to the root, a lot of it rests on the shoulders of leadership. If it's not the managing partner, founder, CEO, whoever it is, of what are you doing to push the envelope? What are you doing to set a better example? What are you doing to push yourself and be decisive, making good decisions based on that mission statement and the core principles that the firm stands for? And that's what builds the brand. That's what builds kind of this undying loyalty of clients for years and years that refer their family members because they know they'll be taken care of. And these are such key things. And then they kind of say, well, that's a lot of work. I don't want to do any of that. Let me just throw more money at marketing. Let me throw more money at advertising. And the problem is, advertising, for instance, at least digitally, is a diminishing returns market unless you have an incredible brand, right? And so you're paying more and more and more. The cost, to actually deliver the case and what you're getting from the case is pretty much staying pretty similar unless, laws change. And so what can you do to supplement it? And then they get mad at the agency, which is, hey, it's costing me more to generate these cases. And the agency's like, what, throws their hands up. What do you want me to do? It's more competitive. I don't know what you want me to do about this. And the answer is, what are you doing to supplement those other channels, right? Increase your brand awareness. Make sure that you're reaching out, keeping in touch with people. Make sure that your website is really well done. It loads quickly. Make sure it has all the latest things that it needs. Make sure your message is not just generic SEO message from 15 years ago with this incredible redundancy. Revisit these things. Would you hire you? It's a question I ask a lot of firms. Would you hire you if you or a family member were hurt, and you were going to hire you if they're a personal injury firm? and really kind of getting them to go through that exercise gets them to see, oh shoot, it's not a one-stop shop of just blame my agency, and then they bounce around 4 or 5 different agencies, and then they decide that marketing doesn't work. I'm sorry, there you need to take those fingers and point them inward and see what you can do to be a better leader and a better business and better tracking and things like that. And so it's just more of a wake-up call because it's only gonna get more competitive.
Mhm.
Um, and so
I see it. And you're hitting on it's the backbone. When we talk about a vision and where you're going, it's the backbone of the culture within the firm. That's what helps keep people. It's the backbone of your marketing and the story that you're telling. And so it all works together. And I appreciate you hitting on this, and hopefully our listeners are taking action based on that. I'd like to turn the corner a little bit because you've talked a little bit about marketing toward the tail end of this, and a big part of marketing, or at least in evaluating marketing and making sure it's constantly working for you and a value to a business, is being able to assess benchmarks, be able to review reports, or whether it's a marketing partner or an internal marketing director. Ideally, as a managing partner or a firm administrator, you are constantly being fed what's happening, what's changing, and where we're going. Peter, you have extensive experience in the world of reporting and being able to identify the most important metrics that matter, the ones that impact the business. What guidance would you give our listeners when it comes to building efficiency in the reporting process itself? Any particular metrics you would advise focusing on?
Yes, and that is quite a big question and quite an important question, um, because a lot of people currently treat reports as not important. Honestly, if the listeners think honestly, the last time they actually got a report and dove into it with the intention of, do I understand this? Second, what action items can I take or are being taken by the data I'm receiving from this report? And how can I compare this data to previous data? That is the purpose of reporting. It's to tell you how well it's a benchmark, it's a mirror of the success or not the success of where you're going. And all too often, a lot of agencies provide reporting which is not important. It'll be some data, which is good, but data is only as valuable as you can compare it to other data. You had 1,000 visitors. Okay, what's the first question every firm is going to ask? Did I sign any cases from it? Like, is it good? And it's a common thing I talk about, which is activity does not necessarily equate to productivity. You could write 100 blogs and they're all garbage. And it was a lot of work. It took a lot of time to write those blogs. But did it answer the questions? Did it turn into phone calls? Did it turn into cases? So make sure you understand the purpose of reporting, right? That's kind of the first thing. The second thing, what are you trying to understand? What are you trying to track, right? Which is essentially you're paying money to do something, whatever that something is. How are you tracking the success of that something, right? If you have an agency, they're probably working hard, but is it translating into, for instance, signed cases? So now all of a sudden you're at a point where you have two things. You have to have the marketing report and your intake report and compare that data together. You want to make sure where along the lines, and so it's essentially activity and volume, right? Whether it's traffic, impressions. So intention or interest turns into engagement. So are they going on? Are they staying on? Do they like what they see? And are you receiving calls, chats, web forms, whatever the form of engagement is? And are you signing those people? Is it a high quality index as opposed to low quality? And then doing a simple comparison of the value or the fees from the new cases coming in. Does this pay at least a couple times over for what it's costing to actually bring those calls in? And then you kind of tie in overhead and things like that, and you'll have a pretty good understanding of, essentially, let me simplify all of it, how much money is going out, how much money is coming in, how profitable am I? If you can't quickly ascertain that, you probably don't have either the right reporting or the reporting is not drilling down deep enough where you can actually answer those things. And the one final thing I'll mention on this is a lot of firms focus, unfortunately, on the number of cases they've signed as the only thing to look at. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you only look at that and you keep scaling, let's just say sign 10% more cases, 10% more cases, and you end up spending 15 to 20% more to get those cases, you are actually not growing profitably. You're doing the opposite, which goes to Matt's point earlier when he was talking about if you don't fix those inefficiencies and you bring on more clients, that you're not going to actually grow profitably, right? So you're actually spending more time working these cases, right? You're probably not providing the best experience possible because you might not be have all the resources. You're spending too much to acquire the cases, and so at this point, what are you doing? It'd be actually better for you to take 20% off of those cases, re-understand how you're getting them, what it's costing you, where's your profitability index. Like, these are all things that any listener should be doing each year as a wrap up of the prior year and say, how did I fare profitably, not just number of signed cases.
Mhm. Which goes back to the efficiency. You have to, if you have junk data, you're never going to be able to discern correctly for your business. You have to be able to commit to getting the right data up front. And one piece too, you mentioned, Peter, which I don't want our listeners to lose. And I would agree with the statement. You mentioned, if I understood correctly, you at least want to make sure you're getting 2x back. So basically, I understand that to be a 3-to-1 return on investment. For every dollar you put in, you get minimum $3 back. Is that accurate? Is that what you were suggesting?
Yes,
Which
at
is a
least.
2x return.
Yes, essentially, you're paying, let's say you pay $1, right? And the case provides $3 back. You get to pay that dollar back to marketing or whatever area generated it, and you have $2 profit. One of those goes typically to the overhead of the firm and paying for actually working that case through to fruition. And you'll have one other dollar, which usually should go towards the vision, the future vision. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to grow? Are you going to save it? Are you going to invest it in other things? You might want to go after other case types. You might want to invest in further technology to make it so your firm works smarter. And so you at least would want something like that. If you're breaking even, you are working for free. Working for free is not a sustainable model.
And continue to serve clients working for free. No. But I think that's such an important piece, because a lot of lawyers they may be investing in various marketing, but they've never really understood, what does success even look like? Well, what I'm hearing you say is that's kind of bare minimum. That's the first rung of success. If you're assessing whether this is even working for you, start there from an efficiency standpoint. And naturally, the higher you can grow that return, the better. But it reinforces the importance of not just tracking it purely from a case count standpoint. You have to be able to look at the data further and assess the value of those cases coming in the door to make that calculation. So I just wanted to make sure that point was concrete for listeners, because that is a great way to be able to start your journey toward building efficiency in marketing. And I am so thankful you hit on that, Peter. What
Yeah.
other thoughts do you have as we wrap up here on that point?
Honestly, I would love to talk about the exact inverse of what we just talked about, because this is something, Tanner, I'm sure you run into all the time. A firm is spending a certain budget that maybe they came up with 5 years ago or 7 years ago, and they're still running with the same budget, thinking it's going to accomplish the same thing. And by not doing the reporting and really understanding, oh my goodness, this is actually producing a high level profit, let's say 5x or 6 or sometimes 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, right? That should have more money put into it. But if they don't look at the data and see, oh my goodness, this is better than in a savings account. It's actually better and more profitable for me to put the money into further marketing initiatives instead of a set it and forget it in this ever growing landscape. They came up with the budget. I always laugh at sometimes how budgets are even thought of. I say, hey, so I see you're spending X. I'm just curious what thought process went into that. Was there any like analysis or strategic thinking? And they say, no, honestly, it's one of two things. It's either the budget that they carried over from the previous agency or from whoever, they didn't even revisit it. Or the second is it's the amount of money I could live with losing and not losing sleep over it. So all of a sudden it becomes, 5,000 bucks a month. I it's not the biggest deal if that doesn't work. And so all of a sudden it's not strategic at all. It's just what they could afford losing, as if they went to Vegas and they're like, if I don't win, I don't win. And I look at it and I say, okay, well, were you aware that firms that are trying to grow in a competitive market, when they really have the correct partners and everything, they're spending 10, 15, 20, sometimes upward of 30% of gross revenue. So that means if for every $1 million you're making as a firm, you're spending 200,000 or, 250,000 in marketing advertising to acquire additional cases and revenue. And when I put it that way, they say, "Oh my goodness, I've been spending only like $2,000 a month." And I say, you're either going to get swallowed up or stay out of the game. Focus on your brand, have a really good website, but don't be surprised if you're dabbling in marketing and advertising in a highly competitive market if it's not going to work. And then again, you get the jaded stories of, I tried marketing, I tried Google pay-per-click once and it didn't work. And it's like, okay, well, I was probably missing a strategy.
Yeah, it's not always just that overall budget, right? Coming to that is one thing, but then how to allocate that overall budget, right? And staying agile within that budget, to your point about understanding what's working, most importantly, and moving resources into what's working when it's working. Because as we know, what we do changes so fast. And we talked recently with another guest about the over dependence in one particular ad platform, for example, which is fine when that ad platform is absolutely killing it with results. If you're, like you said, if you're getting 10x from that platform and there's room to expand, by all means expand, right? But also be prepared for when that platform has its inevitable fall. That you're spread out. You've got at least some investment in other areas where you can quickly be agile, move resources into those other platforms to make up for that.
Completely. I commonly use an analogy of riding the wave like an ocean wave until it crashes, but you want to have diversification. Do not put all your eggs in one basket, which is exactly what you just talked about, Matt, of if you become solely reliant on that one thing, the second it breaks, your business model is really at risk. And all of the employees that you have are relying on you to have visionary thinking and think ahead of that, which is why embracing some of the latest technologies and what can you do to diversify is a really healthy thing. It's the same reason attorneys go to CLEs and they have to continue their legal education. I almost wish there was continuing marketing education, so that way they protect their people as well, their clients.
Peter, I've enjoyed this discussion. I know our listeners have as well. Do you have any closing advice for law firms who are seeking more efficiency within their practice?
Honestly, I think there's no time like the present. If you haven't really looked at reporting previously, take some time block, even if it's over a weekend, and start going down the rabbit hole of understanding how your law firm is working and what's not working, and be ready for some surprises. And then you can perhaps start assessing, do I have the right people on the right seat on the bus? Do I have the right vendors? Do I have the right agencies? Um, that's what I would say. Honestly, going down that, doing an honest, unbiased assessment of, do I know where my money's going? Do I know the experience I'm providing for my clients? Read some of the reviews. Go Google your own name, read the reviews, and don't take it as that guy didn't know what he was doing or talking about. Look at it from, well, what could I do to prevent that in the future? How could I take more responsibility? These are all really good exercises where you don't need to have an MBA. You don't need to know what, key performance indicators are. You don't need to do any of those things. You just need to kind of take a fresh look at it, engage the people that you currently have, or start doing a little bit more research and equipping yourself with the knowledge so you can take a little bit more control, instead of just having it run its own course, with a set and forget it model.
It's a great word for our listeners. What's the best way for everyone to reach out to you?
If you go to the website firmperformance.com, you'll see a picture of me, and so you'll know you're at the right place. Yeah, that would be fine. Or LinkedIn is by far the most common, and I post relatively regularly there. So happy to engage any conversations. One thing just to note, I'm happy to help. So it's not a sales pitch. A lot of times I'll talk with firms and I'll kind of start doing an assessment. Say, hey, you have the right people internally. I would just do a better job of delegating and do a better job of asking questions. So, but it's definitely worth the effort of look inward, see what you can do to make 2025, 2026 better. That's what I would say.
Thanks again, Peter. For those listeners, if you haven't subscribed yet to our LAWsome podcast, we encourage you to do so. We try to update the podcast a couple times a month, and as you can see, definitely from this, we go out and we find the best of the best, the ones who have definitely lived it. They're not just out there talking about it. They've worked with firms, and so we promise to continue to deliver as much content that's going to help you practically in your day-to-day and practicing law and running a law firm and driving the marketing. So, Peter, you're a world of wisdom. Thanks again.
Thank you both. I really appreciate it.